Ladies and gentlemen, I invite you to join me in prayer or reflect upon your own tradition. Lord, the moment of graduation is here, and we ask you to share this day with us, thankful for the opportunities that have made this day and ceremony a reality, for the splendid minds and abilities of these graduating students, for the enthusiasm and dedication of the faculty, for the assistance and concern of the staff, we give you thanks. For the families and loved ones who have sacrificed and supported them during this demanding year, we give you thanks. We pray that what has been absorbed in this year of education and reflection may assist these leaders to maintain the flexibility and creativity which their future positions of leadership will demand. Be present with our graduates and their families, we pray, as they prepare to move throughout the world in roles of ever-increasing responsibilities. For we ask your blessings upon this happy occasion. In your most holy presence we pray. Amen.
Please be seated. We would like to thank the Pennsylvania Army National Guard, elements of the 1st of the 108th Field Artillery for participating in our ceremony today and honoring our guest speaker with a 19-gun salute.
The U.S. Army War College faculty is highly regarded for its dedication to teaching, scholarship, and service. We therefore take great pride in recognizing those faculty members who have been selected by their peers as exemplifying the highest standards of excellence in each of those areas. This morning, we will recognize faculty who have excelled as teachers during academic year 2016. Award winners receive an Army War College certificate and a letter of congratulations from the Commandant, Major General William E. Rapp. Joining him in the award presentations are the Provost of the Army War College, Dr. Lance Betros, and the Dean of the School of Strategic Landpower, Dr. Richard Lacuman.
The following faculty members will receive the Excellence in Teaching Award for their performance in the core courses. Dr. James E. Gordon, Department of Military Strategy, Planning, and Operations. Dr. Christian Keller, Department of National Security and Strategy. Colonel Tommy G. Thompson, Department of Command, Leadership, and Management.
Research and Writing Awards will now be presented. The United States Army War College Student Awards Program recognizes outstanding student research, writing, and speaking on issues of importance to national security. The awards presented today are sponsored by the U.S. Army War College, by the Army War College Foundation, and by external organizations that encourage excellence in military scholarship. The Chief Executive Officer of the Army War College Foundation, Colonel Retired Ruth B. Collins, the Dean, Dr. Richard Lacuman, the Provost, Dr. Lance Betros, the 50th Commandant of the U.S. Army War College, Major General William E. Rapp, and the 39th Chief of Staff of the U.S. Army, General Mark A. Milley, will present the Student Research and Writing Awards. Please hold your applause until all awards have been presented. Our first two awardees are Army War College Fellows who are not in attendance today due to operational reasons.
Second place in the 2016 Secretary of Defense National Security Essay Competition goes to Colonel David C. Menser, mentor, Professor Douglas E. Waters.
First place in the 2016 Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff's 1,500-word strategy research essay competition goes to Lieutenant Colonel Jeffrey D. McCoy, Project Advisor, Professor John F. Troxel.
Second place in the 2016 Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff 1,500-word strategy research essay competition goes to Lieutenant Colonel Jaron K. Price, Project Advisor, Dr. David La.
Third place in the 2016 Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff's 1,500-word strategy research essay competition goes to Lieutenant Colonel Benjamin R. Johnson, Lieutenant Colonel Johnson also won the Commandant's Award for Distinction in Research. Project advisor for both his award-winning papers is Dr. Christopher N. Hamner.
The following students are being honored with the Commandant's Award for Distinction in Research. Colonel Finn Langer, Project Advisor, Dr. Antulio J. Echeverra.
Colonel Michael D. Higginbotham, Mentor, Lieutenant Colonel Jerome T. Sabayan.
Colonel Charles D. Ngeti, Project Advisor, Colonel Iron B. Laus.
Colonel Peter Nieuwenhuis, Project Advisor, Colonel Douglas V. Mastriano.
Lieutenant Colonel Andrew S. Zicinas, Project Advisor, Dr. Mary Beth Ulrich.
The following student is being honored with the Foreign Area Officer Association Research Award. Colonel Samuel W. Curtis, Project Advisor, Colonel Thomas E. Shepard.
The following student is being honored with the Armed Forces Communications Electronic Association Writing Award. Lieutenant Colonel Bethany C. Aragon, Project Advisor, Colonel George P. McDonald.
The following student is being honored with the General Matthew B. Ridgway Writing Award. Lieutenant Colonel Carter L. Price, Project Advisor, Professor Harry A. Tomlin.
The following students are being honored with the Army War College Foundation for Outstanding Strategy Research Paper. Colonel Mikhail Plumas, Project Advisor, Colonel Thomas J. Moffitt.
Colonel Darren D. Huxley, Project Advisor, Captain Wade D. Turvold.
Lieutenant Colonel Azariel Loray, Project Advisor, Dr. R. Evan Ellis.
Colonel Edwin J. Callahan, Project Advisor, Dr. Shepard J. Giras.
Mr. Mark A. Carter, Project Advisor, Dr. Frank L. Jones.
The following student is being honored with the Army War College Foundation Colonel Don and Mrs. Ann Bussier Military Intelligence Writing Award. Lieutenant Colonel Craig M. Misseri, Project Advisor, Professor Richard C. Copeland.
The following student is being honored with the Army War College Foundation Colonel Jerry D. Cashern Memorial Writing Award. Colonel Philip J. Ryan, Project Advisor, Dr. Christopher H. Hamner.
The following student is being honored with the Army War College Foundation Colonel Francis J. Kelly Counterinsurgency Writing Award. Commander Mark E. O'Connell, Project Advisor, Dr. Conrad C. Crane.
The following student is being honored with the Army War College Foundation Daniel M. Lewin Cyber Terrorism Technology Writing Award. Commander Joseph W. Smotherman, Project Advisor, Chaplain John Callerson.
The following student is being honored with the Army War College Foundation Dr. Sarah L. Morgan Civilian Development and Management Writing Award. Lieutenant Colonel Christopher G. Lindner, Project Advisor, Dr. George J. Woods.
The following student is being honored with the Association of the United States Army Writing Award. Lieutenant Colonel Jeffrey W. Wright, Mentor, Professor Philip M. Evans.
The following student is being honored with the Marine Corps Association and Foundation General Thomas Holcomb Writing Award. Lieutenant Colonel Corey M. Collier, Project Advisor, Colonel Timothy C. France.
The following students are being honored with the Military Officers Association of America Writing Award. Colonel Rory A. Crooks, Project Advisor, Professor William G. Braun.
Lieutenant Colonel Jason B. Blevins, Project Advisor, Professor William G. Braun.
The following student is being honored with the Military Order of World Wars Writing Award. Lieutenant Colonel Stephen E. Skeminar, Mentor, Dr. Paul C. Giselle.
The following student is being honored with the Red River Valley Fighter Pilots Association Writing Award. Lieutenant Colonel Sherry J. Levon. Project Advisor, Colonel Nancy J. Grandy.
The following student is being honored with the Reserve Officers Association Lieutenant General Thomas J. Plews Writing Award. Lieutenant Colonel Robert T. Crum. Project Advisor, Dr. Andrew Hill.
The following student is being honored with the Carlisle Barracks and Cumberland Valley chapter of the Association of the U.S. Army AUSA Award for Excellence in Public Speaking, Colonel Richard J. Ball.
To honor his leadership, the Army War College Foundation will present a lifetime alumni membership to the class president, Colonel Brian P. Hernandez. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in a round of applause for our award winners.
Ladies and gentlemen, the 50th Commandant of the United States Army War College, Major General William E. Rapp.
Good morning, class of 2016. To our distinguished guests, our families, what a beautiful day to be here in Carlisle. 62 degrees is just perfect for this kind of event. But the significance of the day is really the achievements of these students who've excelled in a tough but vitally important program of study here at the Army War College. This class, the 100th resident class, will always hold a special place in my heart. My thanks to you for your great effort, your great attitude, and for bringing Jim Thorpe back to Carlisle. I didn't need that second phone call. My thanks go to the faculty and the staff of the U.S. Army War College for your professionalism as teachers and mentors. Being the gold standard for strategic leader development and education comes from having a world-class faculty, and my thanks to you. I've got the distinct pleasure of introducing for our graduation speaker, a soldier who for over 36 years has exemplified the skills and attributes that we all aspire to as warriors and strategic leaders. John Maynard Keynes once famously challenged an audience by saying, "I change my opinion when the information changes. What do you do?" In a world of increasing complexity and velocity of change, putting in the intellectual effort to really think about the future character of war and how to build an army for success in that world has never been more important. Since becoming Chief of Staff of the Army last August, General Milley has energized the wide team to look at the future and what that means for our Army. He's fought tirelessly to maintain the capability and capacity of all three Army components needed to defend America, preserve national freedom of action, and provide strategic options for the President. His steady leadership with soldiers from platoon all the way up to the Joint Chiefs of Staff has been remarkable in these turbulent times. He is truly Army strong, and it's my great honor to introduce to you the 39th Chief of Staff of our Army, General Mark Milley.
Well, it's a great day, and I want to thank Bill Rapp for that introduction, and I particularly appreciate having to hands with the opportunity to shake hands with some of the Writing Award winners. I noticed there was a SEAL, a Green Beret, and a Marine, and I think that speaks volumes of how our Army and our military has changed over the years, where we can teach those three groups of people actually to write. So that's good. And as a Green Beret, I can actually say that. So, no, that's great. And it's a real honor for me to be here as the guest speaker and really to congratulate the class of 2016. You're the 100th graduating class of the United States Army War College, and because we don't do math at West Point anymore, we actually date this school from 1905, which would have put the 100th class in 2005, but we're calling the class of 2016 the 100th class. So, Bill, you can explain it to me later since you went to West Point and I didn't, as to how you do that math, but I'm sure it's good. I'm sure it makes sense. Hey, look, and I'm really speaking to students here, you're graduating from one of the nation's premier educational experience, and in my view, the nation's premier war college, the Army War College. It's a critical component in your personal development. It's a critical component in the development of our nation's strategic leaders, but not only our nation's. As you know well, you have partners and ally officers with you. You have other governmental agencies, and you have various folks from a wide variety of walks of life in your ranks. And collectively, all of you, whether you realize it or not, are going to be strategic leaders in the very near future. And I want to thank Bill Rapp, the 50th Commandant here. I guess that means we change Commandants every 2 years. You're in your second year, so I guess that means I have to change you out. So, okay, that's Princeton math. So, but I do want to thank you, Bill, for having me here. I have a 1-hour speech to deliver. The weather's nice. And then Rapp told me to cut it down, so not only will I thank Rapp, but all of you should be thanking Rapp as well. And thanks also to Bill, your team, and the faculty for the great job they've done in educating the class of 2016, because the education that they put into their brains is going to pay back here in the not-too-distant future. I also want to thank folks for being here that are ambassadors and diplomats and military attachés. We have quite a few. I won't name them all, but thank you for being here. I know as well that we have quite a few active National Guard, Reserve, and retired general officers and command sergeant majors in the crowd today, and thank you all for being here. We have representatives from a variety of political leaders in the United States. Thank you as well. You know, the Carlisle and the broader community in and around Carlisle has played an important role here for a century for this War College, and they have been extraordinary partners with us, the U.S. Army. And I want to thank them and their leaders for not only being here, but for all of their support they've given. And I want to also thank the Salute Battery from the Guard and the Army Band out of Fort Dix, New Jersey. I'd like to give them another round of applause if we could. And most importantly, I'd like to actually thank the family and the friends of the students that are graduating today. The military, the Army, no matter what branch, no matter what country, is a family affair. And none of us could survive the rigors of service. None of us could travel overseas into combat zones without the support of our families. And our character, our integrity, our intellectual development is all a direct result of our mothers, our fathers, and brothers, sisters, grandparents, and even our sons and daughters. So without you, the families, none of these students would be here today. So how about for the students to give your families a round of applause? So this has been an important 10 months for you and your development as a leader. And I'm told there's 376 of you crossing the stage today. One had a child apparently and was given the diploma separately, and 3 others had to graduate early because of deployments, for a total class graduation of 380 men and women from multiple locations. But all of you demonstrate an extraordinary amount of experience. Your average age of service is 21 years, some more, some less. You're a great group of officers, and you have every reason very much to be proud of yourself. You're a very selective group. For the American officers, only 9.3% get selected to go to the War College, and even less are selected to come to the Army War College. Regardless of service, you're in the top 5 to 10% of your respective branch. 75% of you have served in combat in Iraq, and another 65% have served in combat in Afghanistan. That's an enormous amount of tactical and operational combat experience, probably not seen since the post-World War II or post-Korea, post-Vietnam days. You represent all the services of the United States military. As I'm told, there's 11 in the Navy, so Navy, let's hear it. Yeah. That is so weak. No wonder you lost Jim Thorpe. Oh my God. 16 Marines make up for the Navy. That's pretty weak for naval infantry. And as the son of a Marine, I can say that. So, and 26 from the Air Force. How about it? Aim high. That sounded aim low to me. So, now this one should be pretty loud. We have one member of the United States Coast Guard. Hey, dude, you just outdid the Navy, the Air Force, and the Marines. All right, and we have 218 from the United States Army. Jim Thorpe would be proud. Okay, so, and we also have 73 from allied and partner nations. Hey, that was louder than the Army. So, okay, let's hear it now. 5 interagency U.S. governmental agencies. I noticed the 2 CIA guys didn't say anything. They don't want to be identified. Okay. So, hey, look, over the last year, you've had an opportunity, each of you, to learn a lot. Hopefully you did that. And you learned from each other. And you pushed each other to think differently, to think creatively, to think critically about the problems of the world that we're facing today. And you've engaged in some sort of debate or intellectual combat. You've really attacked some complex problems, and I know many of you wrote about them and worked in small groups on them, and you've advanced the entire body of knowledge about strategy and leader development and the strategic use of land power and joint and combined operations and a wide variety of other topics. 21 of you, or correction, 29 of you walked across this stage and received some kind of award. That actually means, according to Princeton math, that 351 of you didn't get any award. But that's okay. I was in the half of the class that made the top half possible, so I can empathize with all of you. And regardless of whether you got an award or not, every one of you has my personal congratulations, and I know that every one of you is rightly proud. And it hasn't been all work and study and no play, and I'm proud to say that, as Bill mentioned, you dominated this year's Jim Thorpe, and you brought back the trophy, and you demonstrated that athletic scholarships for Army universities are still alive and well, so good job. And by the way, you may or may not know it, but Rapp actually lost the cup as a student. So you got something on the Commandant. So both on and off the field, you've all demonstrated what it takes to be a leader. You've demonstrated competence and courage and character, and you've faced and overcome challenges both in your previous assignments and here at school with your fellow colleagues, and you forged enduring bonds that I guarantee will come in handy later in life. I went to the Naval War College, and I continually run across classmates, not only in the Navy, but the other services that have been proven useful over the years as we made friends in Newport. And you will have the same exact experience. And you will not only have made friends with other members of services in the United States, but also, more importantly, perhaps, in some cases, you've made great friends with allies and partners. And I strongly encourage you to keep that network alive, because at some point, someday, at least one of you is going to have to use those connective tissues and that network to probably solve some sort of crisis in the world. So I'd ask that you do that. So what's next? You're going to graduate today. You're going to come up, get a fake piece of paper. Actually, you're going to get your real one in the building behind me. And so what happens next? You know, education is designed to deepen your understanding and prepare you theoretically for what lies ahead. And as you know, our education from high school and college and our early military education at basic courses, advanced courses, and the Leavenworth, staff colleges, etc., they prepared us for the first 20 years or so of our careers. And they made us subject matter experts, more or less, on tactics and operations. And here, though, you're transitioning. You're crossing a bridge. Today, you're graduating from a senior service school. Today, you're graduating from a war college. Today, you're marking a significant transition in your career, and you are now transitioning literally into strategic leaders. You are no longer tacticians and operators. You are now, by definition, strategic leaders. And the past year has provided you some academic understanding and rigor to prepare you for that new role. The demand of your strategic thinking and leadership is critical. It's immediate. And every one of you is going to have to become a master. And your learning cannot stop today. You've got to continue to do that and master the skills and the art of strategy, and to ensure that our U.S. military power or the military power of your respective country is properly wielded. Every one of you is going to move on to serve on general staffs, either joint or service. Many of you, in a very short time, are going to be general officers. And I can tell you that you know it, you've studied it, that wars are always won by the sergeants and the lieutenants and the captains and the colonels and the private soldiers. But they're often lost with bad strategy. And put differently, good strategy is necessary but not sufficient to win. But bad strategy guarantees failure. You have to always have good tactics and good operations, good units, good soldiers, well-trained, well-led. But you also always, in order to actually win real war, you have to have good strategy. And the absence of good strategy will lead to catastrophic failure in war and the needless waste of lives. Good strategy, rigorous, thorough strategic thinking is essential to winning a war. That is your mandate. From this day forward, your mandate is to be America's strategic leaders or the strategic leaders of your respective country. And you must avoid the tendency to elevate tactics to strategy, the tacticization of strategy, which I find is quite prevalent in a lot of thinking. And doing so requires that you build and maintain your personal credibility as a strategist. You're going to have to seize and hold the intellectual high ground on a daily basis, and you're going to have to maintain a very deep and thorough understanding of very complex issues. And you're going to have to master the skills of debate, argument, logic, critical thinking. And you're going to have a broad and very deep understanding of military operations and military history. You're going to have to earn your place at the table. And you'll be at a table with some very aggressive people. You're going to shape the future strategy by consistently and continually demonstrating not only your competence, but also your integrity over time. If you're an American, you're facing 5 fundamental security challenges over the next 15 years or 20 years of your service, which is about what you have left. I've got about 3, you got about 20. And you're going to live with this all your life. And you're going to be dealing with Russia, China, Iran, North Korea, and counterterrorism operations, probably for the remainder of your career. There's no absolute prediction in life, but those are the 5 challenges that have been laid out by the Secretary of Defense of the United States, and I happen to agree with them. And I think those are fundamentally what you're going to be looking at for the remaining time that you're in service. I also think that we are on the cusp, we're on the leading edge, the front edge of a fundamental change in the character of ground warfare. Not the nature of war. The nature of war is immutable. That's going to stay the same for forever, and it has for the last millennia, with fog and friction and war being a political act and so on. But we are on the cusp of a fundamental change in the character of ground warfare. So fundamental that it's going to be not unlike going from a smoothbore musket to a rifled musket, or going from horse-ridden units to tracked and wheeled vehicles, the introduction of the airplane, the introduction of the radio. Fundamental changes throughout military history have not happened that often, but we are at the beginning of a fundamental change in the character of ground warfare. And you're going to have to face that challenge. You're going to have to figure that out as well. We're already seeing it happen in the maritime and air domains over the last so many years. And now you're going to start seeing it happen in the ground domain as well. You're going to have to address and frame your challenges through the strategic lens in everything you do. You're going to have to balance ends, ways, and means. You're going to have to stay alert to subtle changes in the strategic environment that are going to impact your organization and your mission. You're going to have to understand your enemy's capability in depth, his intent, and you're going to have to also understand his behavior recently and historically. You're going to have to formulate and communicate clear visions and purpose and intent that supports the national strategy. And you're going to have to set the agenda and manage the time of yourself and others to reflect the strategic and operational priorities. As a strategic leader, your moral courage and your character is going to be critical. And it's going to be tested early, and it's going to be tested often. And you, each of you, are going to have to maintain your integrity no matter what the pressure and no matter what the cost to your personal career. You do not need to be a cause celeb or play out your views on the front page of the New York Times or the Washington Post. But you must have guts. And you're going to have the guts to speak truth to power in a professionally competent, respectful way that is based on facts and rigorous analysis and nothing else. And through it all, you're going to have to take care of your people. You're going to have to exercise compassion and set the example and mentor and develop them to be the future strategic leaders and thinkers of our nation beyond you. You're going to have to grow in them a spirit of lifelong learning and intellectual skepticism and critical thinking. And I encourage you all to have a deep sense of humility and self-reflection, to teach them how to think strategically and to be comfortable with ambiguity and uncertainty and to be humble about it. Without a doubt, some of your subordinates of today, or the units that you previously commanded, will be the next generation of future strategic leaders beyond you, and they will face even a more increasingly uncertain and complex world as you are facing today. It is your duty to prepare them for what lies ahead as well and encourage their diversity of thought, their critical analysis, their creativity, and their innovation. Sometime around 2030, about 14, 15 years from now or so, one of you is going to be me. One of you is going to be the Chief of Staff of the Army, or the Chief of Naval Operations, or the Commandant of the Marine Corps, or the Chief of Staff of the Air Force. Maybe one of you will be the Chairman of the U.S. Joint Chiefs of Staff. And those subordinates that you previously commanded are going to be sitting there right in front of you, just like you are of me. And I would encourage your mentorship, your compassion, and your deep love of not only nation, but of them, to mentor them and bring them up. Fox Connor had a tremendous influence, as many of you may know, on George Marshall, perhaps America's greatest general, on Dwight Eisenhower, on George Patton, and many others. And Connor is the best example that I know of on how to mentor future strategic leaders. And if you don't know about him, figure it out, do some research, and learn what he did and how he did it. He had a huge impact on the U.S. strategic approach to World War II, and he never even fought in World War II. Since 1904, and through 99 classes before yours, the Army War College has educated and developed strategic leaders. It's prepared you for this exciting moment when you walk across this stage and you transition, and you are then dubbed magically a strategic leader. But it's just a beginning, it's not an end. And your future, I guarantee it, is going to be extraordinarily challenging, beyond what you can even imagine today. But I am also confident that every one of you is ready. You're ready to engage, you're ready to lead, and you're ready to win. And I want each of your family members to know that you can have confidence in their leadership of America's armed forces, and their leadership of our allies and partnered armed forces. That every one of these leaders you can be proud of. They are successful in part because of you. I want to thank all of you for being here today, and congratulations to each one of the graduating class of 2016. Army strong.
Major General Rapp and the United States Army War College are honored to confer upon General Mark A. Milley the degree of Masters of Letters, Strategic Studies, honoris causa, together with all honors, rights, and privileges pertaining thereto, given at Carlisle, Pennsylvania, this 10th day of June, 2016.
That's cool. Well, thank you very much. Appreciate it.
It's the only one from an accredited school.
Rapp just told me that's the only master's degree I have from an accredited school. That's nice. Nice job.
Ladies and gentlemen, at this time, Class 2016 diplomas are conferred under the authority of the United States Congress. In recognition of their accomplishments, the graduates will receive the diploma of the United States Army War College and, if earned, the degree of Master of Strategic Studies. Graduates will be presented diplomas by Dr. Lackerman, Dean of the School of Strategic Land Power, Dr. Betros, Provost of the Army War College, Major General Rapp, Commandant, and General Milley, Chief of Staff of the Army. Please hold your applause until all degrees and diplomas have been presented.
From Seminar 1, Colonel Eric Sean Kreider. Lieutenant Colonel Rita Shaib from Morocco. Colonel Chad Chasteen. Lieutenant Colonel Patrick R. Crawford. Lieutenant Colonel Jason J. Jones. Colonel Eric J. Kirchen. Mrs. Sarah Blanding Leonard. Lieutenant Colonel Andrew Nathan Liffring. Lieutenant Colonel Azario Loria from Belize. Lieutenant Colonel Michael J. Martini. Colonel Peter Nieuwenhuis from Netherlands. Colonel John P. Plunkett. Colonel Furman Hewitt Ray. Colonel Karen Jane Rowe. Colonel John Lewis Wedges III. And Colonel Amos Zimba from Zambia.
Seminar 2, Colonel Rory Allen Crooks, Mr. David A. Bagwell, Colonel John Rollins Cavato, Lieutenant Colonel Corey M. Collier, Colonel Peter Eugene Dargle, Lieutenant Colonel Sean Paul Duvall, Lieutenant Colonel Amably Habiyaber, Burundi, Lieutenant Colonel David Robert Hibner, Brigadier General Taeed Tarek Hussain, Bangladesh, Lieutenant Colonel Fahor Karus, Estonia, Lieutenant Colonel Anthony P. McGinty, Lieutenant Colonel Rafael Rodriguez, Jr., Colonel Robert Daniel Rouse, Lieutenant Colonel Charlone E. Stallworth, Lieutenant Colonel Don Lamar Thigpen.
And Seminar 3, led off by Colonel Eric N. Anderson. Colonel Scott Andrew Bird. Lieutenant Colonel Chris M. Briand. Colonel Zaza Chiquidez from Georgia. My apologies, sir. Colonel James Andrew DeLapp. Commander Jeffrey D. Guerrero. Brigadier General Adnan Khan from Pakistan. Lieutenant Colonel Victoria A. Kinsey. Colonel Michael D. Moreau, Jr. Mr. Wilfred James Plumley, Jr. Lieutenant Colonel Lendy Gray Regener. Colonel Ahmed Riyad from Indonesia. Lieutenant Colonel Luis Manuel Rivera. Lieutenant Colonel James P. Scheffler. Colonel Lawrence I. Stewart. Lieutenant Colonel Eric Bennett Towns.
Seminar 4, Colonel Mark Shannon Parker. Brigadier General Khalid Al-Badi, Saudi Arabia. Lieutenant Colonel Brian S. Alban. Lieutenant Colonel Tammy Lynn Ball. Lieutenant Colonel Sheikh Busor. Lieutenant Colonel Carl B. Dobson. Lieutenant Colonel Jeffrey M. Ducavas. Colonel Gary Robert Graves. Colonel Andrew Scott Hansen. Colonel Brian Patrick Hernandez. Lieutenant Colonel David J. Kramer II. Chaplain Colonel David M. Lockhart. Lieutenant Colonel Tal Cruz Shepard. Mrs. Rebecca R. Vaness. Colonel Emiliano Vigorita, Italy.
And Seminar 5, led off by Colonel Barton L. Lawrence, Jr. Colonel Abdulaziz Al-Ashwal. Colonel John T. Blatt. Colonel Negusi Bota from Ethiopia. Colonel Rolanda D. Colbert. Lieutenant Colonel Matthew Gary Cooper. Lieutenant Colonel Stanimir Hristov from Bulgaria. Colonel Darren D. Huxley. Mr. William D. Lantham. Lieutenant Colonel Norberto Rafael Menendez. Lieutenant Colonel Joseph C. Miller. Colonel Robert Len Ralston. Lieutenant Colonel Gary R. Reidenbach. Ms. Andrea M. Toman. Lieutenant Colonel Dennis Gregory Willey. Lieutenant Colonel Michael Todd Zernikow.
Seminar 6, Colonel Zoan Teffer Slyman. Colonel Glenn Robert Bollinger III. Lieutenant Colonel Curtis Eugene Burrell, Jr. Lieutenant Colonel Richard Donald Butler. Mr. Mark Allen Carter. Mr. David Wayne Clay. Lieutenant Colonel Jabril Dabia, Mali. Colonel Richard Gonzalez. Lieutenant Colonel Joshua Allen Kiesler. Lieutenant Colonel Sashko Lashevsky, Macedonia. Colonel Mario Eduardo Latour, Peru. Colonel Kimberly Ann Peoples, Lieutenant Colonel Jeffrey Scott Stetzer, Lieutenant Colonel Dalian Antoine Washington Sr., Lieutenant Colonel Michael Ray Williams.
From Seminar 7, Colonel Nicholas F. Lancaster, Lieutenant Colonel Nathan P. Eista, Colonel Robert Arthur Culp II, Colonel Robert Allen Daville, Colonel Robert D. Forsten, Colonel Kenan Shane Gilliam, Lieutenant Colonel George L. Hamner IV, Colonel Guy Hassan from Israel, Commander Tara L. Hodge, Lieutenant Colonel Mohammed Sarosh Niazi from Afghanistan, Lieutenant Colonel Dean A. Preston, Colonel Carl D. Ramsey, Brigadier General Subari Tomo from Malaysia, Ms. Sonia M. Siros, Lieutenant Colonel Miodrag Vuksanovic from Montenegro, Colonel Jason Arik Walter,
Seminar 8, Colonel Edward Francis Bourville, Colonel Stephen James Adams, Lieutenant Colonel Bethany Claire Aragon, Colonel John Kennard Baker, Lieutenant Colonel Jung W. Choi, Mr. Daniel J. Phobes, Colonel Robert Wayne Marshall, Lieutenant Colonel Robert John Mikish, Lieutenant Colonel Almagata Misunas, Lithuania, Colonel Yuichi Mukanoki, Japan, Colonel Mikhail Plumas, Greece, Lieutenant Colonel Jeffrey M. Prindle, Commander James M. Roach, Colonel Brian E. Walsh, Colonel Eric E. Zimmerman.
Seminar 9, Colonel Theodore M. Thomas II, Lieutenant Colonel Christopher D. Compton, Colonel Kevin Mark Copsey, OBE from the United Kingdom, Chaplain Lieutenant Colonel Louis A. DeTufo, Lieutenant Colonel Andrew Rangrawi Depeki from Papua New Guinea, Lieutenant Colonel Mohammed El Afi from Lebanon, Ms. Sandra M. Jackson, Colonel Jason Knight, Lieutenant Colonel Tobin Andrew Magzig, Colonel Daniel Edward Mouton, Colonel Thomas P. Nelson III, Lieutenant Colonel Carter Limmer Price, Commander Christopher Jason Scott, Lieutenant Colonel Matthew J. Strub, Lieutenant Colonel Kip A. Walgren, Colonel Wanda Nadine Williams.
Seminar 10, Lieutenant Colonel Christopher G. Lindner, Lieutenant Colonel Vasak Avatijan, Armenia, Colonel Richard Jerome Ball, Lieutenant Colonel Jason Bradley Blevins, Colonel Robert Clayton Connell, Lieutenant Colonel Brian P. Elliott, Colonel Robert Barney Fouché, Lieutenant Colonel Ulrich L. Francis, Lieutenant Colonel William Patrick McDonald, Lieutenant Colonel Glenn E. Miller, Lieutenant Colonel David E. Moore, Colonel Patrick Wasija, Uganda. Lieutenant Colonel Hung Nguyen, Vietnam. Lieutenant Colonel Colin Patrick Nikila. Lieutenant Colonel Marlise K. Roth. Mr. Peter M. Stemniski.
Seminar 11, Colonel Kurt Lloyd Stewart. Colonel Maitar Ali Al-Shalawi from Saudi Arabia. Lieutenant Colonel Anthony C. Bauer. Lieutenant Colonel Christopher T. Burt. Lieutenant Colonel Elliot Roosevelt Kagans, Jr. Colonel Bradford D. Coley. Mr. E. Sherelle Crow. Commander Harry W. Hamilton. Colonel Brian Kelly Hershey. Lieutenant Colonel Kelly K. Jones. Lieutenant Colonel Larry C. Niedringhaus II. Lieutenant Colonel Juan M. Sanchez Aldo from Spain. Colonel Gakji Shaipe from Nigeria. Brigadier General Sokan Sin from Cambodia. And Colonel Martin Dale Snyder.
Seminar 12, Lieutenant Colonel Kyle Arley Reed. Colonel Richard Carl Bell, Jr. Lieutenant Colonel Robert B. Brody. Lieutenant Colonel Patricia N. Chavez. Lieutenant Colonel Michael Costello. Colonel Peter Heiko Bechtel. Colonel Ronald Paul Fitch. Mrs. Alice Y. Goodson. Colonel Jen Tay Kim, Korea. Colonel Finn Lange, Germany. Lieutenant Colonel Mona Nashumi, Tunisia. Lieutenant Colonel Justin H. Niederer. Colonel James Marbrooks Schultz. Colonel Stanley John Slewinski. Lieutenant Colonel Timothy W. Vance. Colonel Donald J. Wybu.
Seminar 13 with Colonel William Jason Kane, Jr. Commander Jose A. Arana. Colonel Dwayne Alexander Dickens. Colonel Ahmed Al-Sirsawi from Egypt. Colonel Ernest J. Karlberg. Lieutenant Colonel Gary Ralph Kramlich II. Colonel Bonnie S. Lowe. Colonel Thomas Michael McCardle. Mr. Michael S. Mustafago, Sr. Lieutenant Colonel Kevin L. Parker. Colonel Antonio Manuel Paz. Lieutenant Colonel Henry Christopher Perry, Jr. Lieutenant Colonel Sean R. Satterfield. Lieutenant Colonel Patrick Edward Simon. Colonel Christian Teglas from Romania. And Mr. Chuan Shang Tsai from Taiwan.
Seminar 14, Colonel Bob Ellsworth Willis, Jr. Lieutenant Colonel Lisa Marie Bartel. Commando Michael R. Dolbeck. Colonel Brian Michael Hager. Colonel Todd J. Hanlon. Colonel Andreas S. Hall. Brigadier General Lingalani Joseph, Botswana. Colonel Sang Khan Lee. Colonel John Pascal Levasseur, Canada. Lieutenant Colonel Lewis L. Mitchell. Lieutenant Colonel Stephen O'Neill Murphy. Mr. John C. Nelson. Colonel Volodymyr Postrobilo, Ukraine. Colonel Diana Susan Wendler. Colonel Robert Stephen Wright.
David, just hold there. They get a little bunched up.
Lieutenant Colonel Andrew Stephen Zicinas.
From Seminar 15, Colonel David E. Reisted. Lieutenant Colonel Khalid Akiri from Kuwait. Lieutenant Colonel Perry M. Carper. Colonel Joseph Dale Clark, Jr. Colonel Lance Randolph Eldred. Colonel Brant Douglas Hoskins. Lieutenant Colonel Gregory Scott Johnson. Lieutenant Colonel Robert T. Crum. Mr. Kevin Rogers Cuss. Lieutenant Colonel Sean Edward Leonard. Colonel Nicole Renee Morris. Commander Mark E. O'Connell. Colonel Jean Ouedraogo from Burkina Faso. Lieutenant Colonel David E. Raymond. Lieutenant Colonel Joseph D. Roller. And Lieutenant Colonel Jolt Van Tal from Hungary.
Seminar 16, Colonel Olga Marie Anderson. Lieutenant Colonel Mokhtar Almadou Mankala, Niger. Colonel Andre Peter Balyols. Mr. Terrence K. Battle. Mr. Douglas A. Borman. Chaplain, Lieutenant Colonel Donner C. Brewer III. Lieutenant Colonel Charles Raymond Burnett. Lieutenant Colonel John L. Dauber. Brigadier General Sitram Kodaka, Nepal. Colonel John Matthew Costur. Colonel Philip Sanchez Lepinet, Philippines. Lieutenant Colonel Jason T. Self. Lieutenant Colonel Stoyan Georgiev Shopov, Bulgaria. Lieutenant Colonel Stuart E. Werner. Colonel Robert S. White. Colonel Ryan B. Wolfgram.
And Seminar 17, Colonel Sean Noel Fisher. Lieutenant Colonel Elton Brigu from Albania. Colonel Samuel Walter Matt Curtis. Lieutenant Colonel Michael Anthony Herenchow III. Colonel Keith Richard Gerolimic. Lieutenant Colonel Sherry J. Levon. Lieutenant Colonel Craig Michael Masseri. Colonel Paul David Mazur. Lieutenant Colonel Colonel John Morehouse from South Africa. Lieutenant Colonel Shannon Edward Nielsen. Lieutenant Colonel Michael D. Poss. Mr. Philip Foley Romanelli. Lieutenant Colonel Jarrett Albert Thomas II Colonel Ignatius Yogo Treyono from Indonesia. Lieutenant Colonel John T. Vaughn. And Colonel Randolph Sherlock Wardle.
Seminar 18, Colonel Andrew Lawrence Miltner. Mr. Paul Andrew Bishop. Lieutenant Colonel Roman Javier Cantu. Lieutenant Colonel Andrew M. Clark. Colonel Jason Patrick Conroy. Lieutenant Colonel Kevin Nelson Fonder. Colonel Timothy Royal Frombies. Lieutenant Colonel Sean M. Hankert. Lieutenant Colonel Sadabak Momin Aliyev, Kyrgyzstan. Colonel Mungi Niaga, Kenya. Lieutenant Colonel Gregory O. Olson. Lieutenant Colonel Alberto Rodriguez Cruz. Mr. Andrew K. Swanweber. Lieutenant Colonel Teresa Ann Slosser. Colonel Macha Shudak, Poland. Lieutenant Colonel Stephen J. Snyder.
Seminar 19 with Lieutenant Colonel Kevin Scott Capra. Dr. Norma A. Brandon. Colonel Brian Richard Dunmire. Lieutenant Colonel Philip Kirk Gage. Lieutenant Colonel Christopher P. Gerdes. Colonel Robert F. Howe. Colonel Valerio Luiz Longue from Brazil. Colonel Aliun Monana from Mauritania. Colonel Bruce Anthony Murphy. Colonel Danielle Jacqueline No. Commander Joseph E. Parker III. Lieutenant Colonel Darrell R. Rorick. Colonel Jonathan B. Slater. Lieutenant Colonel Petra Swoboda from the Czech Republic. Lieutenant Colonel Douglas F. Tippett.
Seminar 20, Lieutenant Colonel Thomas J. Robinson, Jr. Colonel Brandon J. Arcuri. Mrs. Carolyn R. Collins. Lieutenant Colonel Sean Crockett. Lieutenant Colonel Luhimwa Fulgens, Democratic Republic of Congo. Colonel Terrence Lee Houston. Lieutenant Colonel Joseph Paul Kuchin. Colonel Daniel Francis Kuntz. Lieutenant Colonel Charles Wesley Lewis. Lieutenant Colonel Charles M. Long, Jr. Lieutenant Colonel Justin L. Mann. Lieutenant Colonel Bridget M. McNamara. Colonel Martin Mikhalko, Slovak Republic. Colonel David C. Phillips. Colonel Galberdrak, Togo, Mongolia. Lieutenant Colonel Hassan Yilmaz, Turkey.
Seminar 21 with Colonel Tommy Joe Lucius, Lieutenant Colonel Tomery C. Brown, Colonel Eric C. Flesh, Lieutenant Colonel Christopher W. Gifford, Mr. Mark R. Ilg, Commander Danny Webster King, Colonel Michael Bernard Layler, Colonel Jose Francisco Melgareo, Lieutenant Colonel Matthew R. Nation, Colonel Charles D. Ngaite from Nigeria, Lieutenant Colonel Victor A. Oriana from El Salvador, Colonel Christopher Scott Sanderson, Colonel David Chandler Snow, Colonel Mio Valadic from Croatia, Lieutenant Colonel Jennifer Schick Walkowitz, Lieutenant Colonel Scott Christopher Woodward,
Seminar 22, Colonel Kyle Eric Ferger, Brigadier General Sammy Al-Hamad Jordan, Lieutenant Colonel Reed Anderson, Lieutenant Colonel David R. Unzadua, Colonel Joseph Daniel Barber III, Colonel Jeffrey J. Britton, Colonel Ronnie Brown, Colonel Raymond Kent Compton, Mrs. Lee C. Green, Colonel Christopher William Hoffman, Colonel Vidit Kalivik, Norway, Chaplain Colonel Gregory J. Long, Lieutenant Colonel Frank Anthony McCoskey, Colonel Bradley Douglas Moses, Colonel Timothy M. Rooney, Lieutenant Colonel Juan A. Soleri, Chile.
And Seminar 23, led off by Colonel Andrew Martin Barr, Colonel Tomas Amador Ramirez from Mexico, Colonel Thomas Dean Asbury, Colonel Kevin Patrick Butler, Mr. Kim A. Colton, Colonel Patrick James Ellis, Lieutenant Colonel Scott William Fitzgerald, Lieutenant Colonel Quavator Rene Gore, Lieutenant Colonel Philip Anthony Holmes, Lieutenant Colonel Maurice Tesue Alogo from Gabon, Lieutenant Colonel Orosh Paternus, Slovenia, Commander Joseph Walter Smotherman, Lieutenant Colonel Scott William Ward, and Colonel Joseph Corey Weller.
Seminar 24, Colonel Catherine Jean Graff, Brigadier General Saeed Najib Ahmed, Pakistan, Mr. Brent G. Bale, Colonel Edwin Joseph Callahan III. Brigadier General Jagadish Shahari, India. Colonel Michael Neville Clancy. Lieutenant Colonel Zacharias Delwich. Colonel Juan Carlos Correa. Lieutenant Colonel Zacharias Delwich. Lieutenant Colonel Benjamin R. Johnson. Captain Scott E. Langham. Lieutenant Colonel Paul Leo Larson. Lieutenant Colonel Earl G. Matthews. Colonel Kevin Allen Mechanic. Mr. Ryan Sean McCannell. Colonel Christopher William Moeller. Colonel Brett James Rankin, New Zealand. Colonel Philip John Ryan.
Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in congratulating the graduates of the United States Army War College Resident Class of 2016.
Ladies and gentlemen, please rise and remain standing for the benediction and singing of the service song medley and Old Lane Sign. The words to the song medley are found in the back of your program.
I invite us to pause once again as we get ready to depart. As these graduating students depart, we ask you, O God, add to their knowledge the support, energy, and zeal to perform their duties. In the days, months, and years ahead of them, grant them your divine gifts of patience, compassion, and the drive to excel, granting them the mindset and humility to serve as sentinels of freedom and protectors of humanity. Dismiss us now with your blessings, we pray. Amen.
Ladies and gentlemen, please remain standing for the departure of the official party. As a reminder to the graduates, all degrees and diplomas, framed and unframed, need to be picked up at the LVCC prior to 1200. The graduation brunch will be in the LaTorte View Community Center according to your reserved times. Award winners, please report to the gazebo for photos. The Army War College gift shop in Root Hall is open until 5 p.m. today. Ladies and gentlemen, this concludes the graduation ceremony. Thank you for attending, and congratulations and best wishes to the Army War College class of 2016. Strength and wisdom.